Colleagues, we are living in exceptional times. They demand exceptional solutions. UN 2.0 calls on all of us in the UN system to transform how we work, not just what we do. Our joint reform efforts as part of the UN 80 initiative will adapt how we work to be more agile and fit for purpose so that we can better serve communities around the world. How we work matters. Innovation, data, digitalization and behavioral insights are no longer optional. They are essential to increase our collective impact. At UNOPS, we see digital transformation as a tool to improve lives, especially for those most in it. We place great emphasis on ongoing transformation. As part of our internal reforms, we are undergoing a multi-year digitalization journey to simplify and strengthen how we operate. This is helping us become faster, more data-driven and more transparent. At the same time, reliance on data is making our work more cost-effective. Our suppliers are key partners in delivering sustainable development. Strengthening how we work with them is part of our transformation. One clear, tangible example of internal innovation at UNOPS is through DRiVE, an initiative that is changing how we work with suppliers to promote sustainable procurement. It supports data-driven decision-making, strengthens due diligence, and promotes supplier improvement, not exclusion. Its reach is vast. Over 13,000 suppliers from over 180 countries have already engaged in DRiVE with strong positive feedback. This is a successful effort with real impact. Our next step is to digitalize this initiative to maximize scale and impact. We are now developing a fully digital DRiVE module to automate and streamline the process. This will make the system scalable, more efficient, and available to more suppliers and potentially to other UN agencies. DRiVE is not just a tool. It's a mindset, a way to embed sustainability into every project that we develop and accountability into every decision. Like any other activity to drive sustainable development, DRiVE is more impactful when pursue it together. We want to share our learnings from this initiative and we invite others across the UN system to join us in using it. Our DRiVE pilot with ILO shows how cross-agency collaboration can accelerate impact. Let's continue to reimagine the way we work and use innovation as a force for sustainable development.
Now I would like to give the floor to Anne-Claire.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm really excited to talk about this fascinating topic and why DRiVE matters. To start with, I'd like to give a little bit of context to what we're trying to do here. Obviously, I'm hoping most of you will know how important sustainable procurement is. Not just as a policy goal, not just as an objective or nice to have. It's really an operational challenge that we all face in the delivery of our projects. Global supply chains are facing increasing scrutiny, ranging from environmental impacts to labor rights, transparency, ethical sourcing. You'll all be familiar with all of the jurisdiction that is building slowly around this with some challenges. But many of these issues are actually really complex. It's about systems, it's a lot of cross-cutting themes. These are dynamic areas where measuring progress, addressing this through our traditional public procurement models has proven challenging. Next slide, please. At the scale of the issue is that at UNOPS, we work with thousands of suppliers, like many of you, I'm sure, across a very wide range of contexts, ranging from fragile and conflict-affected states to developing large-scale infrastructure projects in middle-income countries. And in that setting, managing sustainability risks and ensuring that the suppliers that we work with meet our standards at scale requires much more than simple manual oversight. It requires even more so today than ever, a comprehensive approach. So what we were looking for is a solution that is scalable, that is proactive, and that is based on real data. And faced with this magnitude of problem, UNOPS developed DRiVE. DRiVE was developed as a direct response to all these shifting needs. A tool that uses data, that uses digitalized processes, but that also builds on behavioral science to try and shift the way in which we engage with our suppliers. What we've tried to do is to move not into the compliance space. This isn't about ticking a couple of boxes. This isn't about satisfying a requirement for a document. It's about creating a continuous improvement culture where the suppliers that we work with can improve, can grow, can adapt, and they can find ways to build their capacity to respond to our sustainability needs. But to have this approach that allows us to identify risks earlier and supports capacity building and can help us make more informed procurement decisions. So this is really about building supplier capabilities, taking a risk-based approach, and enabling suppliers to grow into meeting these sustainability requirements. Next slide, please. So why are we bringing this as part of the UN 2.0 agenda and the Quintet of Change? Well, we believe that DRiVE is fully aligned with the UN 2.0 agenda. First of all, it's based on data. We want to build robust supplier assessments with clear metrics that we could track, that we could monitor, that we could seek to have targets around and improve upon. It is about digitalization. So how do we integrate DRiVE into our e-procurement systems? How do we build automated alerts, for example, so that we can support not just procurement practitioners, but project managers in understanding the risks within their supply chain? It's built around behavioral science. This is not about a tick the box exercise. This is about encouraging supplier commitment and supplier accountability. And it's also about foresight. This is about helping us, helping our teams delivering on the ground to anticipate and to mitigate risks within their supply chains, rather than reacting only once these risks actually materialize. And finally, it's about innovation. This has really been about rethinking how we leverage procurement, how we leverage our supplier relationships to build partnerships. So this is a really practical example of how our internal innovation can drive what we hope will be system-wide transformation and truly bridging the gap on the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals.
Thanks, Anne-Claire. I would like to give the floor now to Marcus McKay. Just to mention that we have already published our Purchase for Impact report of this year, so I invite everyone to scan the QR and download it.
Thank you very much, Ana Paula, and thank you very much for all those who have joined this webinar today. I'm going to start focusing a bit more on DRiVE as a program and start taking through the details in which we approach some of the issues that were highlighted initially by our executive director, as well as the issues that were pointed out by Anne-Claire, in order for us to dig deeper into addressing the issue more within a United Nations context, as well as a UNOPS context. Fundamentally, what's important to understand is that DRiVE is a program and an approach to carrying out supply sustainability, due diligence, and risk management, but it's also enabled through the other mechanisms that UNOPS has in place. Anyone working in this area will understand and appreciate that operating in this space is complicated, complex, and requires a multifaceted approach. We do this at UNOPS to support and reinforce DRiVE through having robust policies and procedures established and well in place, as well as engaging proactively with our suppliers in order to develop their capacity, their understanding, and their ability to engage in the approaches and the expectations that we have at UNOPS. Next slide. DRiVE was established under the principles of trying to understand how as well as what approaches suppliers take with regards to responding to the sustainability considerations, the standards and the expectations that we have within UNOPS and within the United Nations international development context. This is based on our United Nations Supplier Code of Conduct, as well as the key areas of focus, which are highlighted on the screen. These 10 areas cover the broad spectrum of sustainability, as well as digging into some of the other key areas of our focus and our interest. Next slide, please. One of the things which is important to take into consideration is when we're engaging with our suppliers over and above their acknowledgement of the Supplier Code of Conduct, it's important that we try for us to get a better understanding of how they're approaching these issues. We've selected to illustrate on the screen the diversity and the scale of the different topic areas that we expect our suppliers to be able to respond to, and for us to be able to have an oversight and understanding of. These areas are rooted not only in the Supply Code of Conduct, but they're also part of the contract management component when we're engaging with our supplier base. Next slide, please. As a procurement or as part of the procurement group and as part of the strengthening of the procurement function, it's very important that DRiVE embodies, enforces, and improves the principles of our procurement principles and reinforces our core values as an organization. When it comes to demonstrating best value for money, DRiVE allows us to look at total cost as well as quality with regards to the delivery of goods and services. And you can consider works within that as well with regards to contractors under the service component. It allows us to demonstrate equal opportunity transparency, also parts of equitability with regards to engaging with suppliers with regards to the expectations. When demonstrating effective competition, it's our ability to respond and engage to the diversity of our market, and not only focusing on subsets or suppliers which are more mature or are able to respond directly to our expectations through familiarity or scale. With regards to the best interest of our partners as well as ourselves, it's very clear for us to be able to engage with our suppliers, have demonstrable results and bring transparency when engaging with the market. And of course, embodying the principles of sustainability throughout all of our engagements that we do. Next slide, please. When it comes to the benefits that DRiVE brings, we see it very clearly demonstrated to us through the enhanced management of risk. One of the areas of focus that we do as an organization is we identify the reduction of risk by the improvement of capacity and understanding of by our suppliers. And we try to balance this by engaging with the suppliers, communicating areas of improvement, as well as in hand reducing our risk exposure. We do use DRiVE as well to improve our relationship with our suppliers, as well as demonstrating the improved relationship as well with our partners or our donors. Due to the nature of the program, it brings supply chain transparency and allow us to form a dialogue and engage with our suppliers in different ways over and above just doing simple screening from data collection. We are here today to be discussing data and digital solutions. And as it was introduced by Anne-Claire, and you'll see throughout the rest of this presentation, the data-driven approach is what's allowed us and enabled us to get to where we are today with DRiVE. And of course, this is all driven by this ability to leverage sustainability, understanding the sustainability profile of our suppliers, and then how we can work with them to identify areas of improvement and change. Next slide, please. Before I conclude, I'm going to discuss the journey that we took with DRiVE and the changes and the implementations that we have been through over the last couple of years. In 2018, UNOPS initiated the efforts to improve and develop supply chain transparency and improve supply chain risk management. This led to the initial development of the program and piloting and testing of the methodology that was in place. And by 2020, the testing and the piloting had coincided with the establishment of the Sustainable Procurement Framework, which then allowed us to embed the data collection, the self-assessment as an Excel format into the solicitation process and part of the procurement requirements. Once we established the working methodology and the different approaches to embedding DRiVE within our solicitations, it was also expanded into becoming part of the mandatory requirements of our revised Sustainable Procurement Framework. This also went hand in hand with improved analytics, data management and reporting, as well as focusing on embedding requirements into the project implementation based on the data that we were getting from the engagement with the suppliers. As we started to understand how DRiVE was being used more, we were understanding some of the different functionalities. We also were experiencing a shift in the available technologies and digital solutions that we were exposed to. This allowed us to move from beyond Excel and into embedding it into our e-tendering platform itself. This in turn allowed us to start extracting the data and developing, let's say, branches or offshoots of the core DRiVE function. And this resulted in development of offshoot applications to identify key risks, which will be presented to you a little bit later. At the beginning of last year, or the first quarter last year, we engaged into a memorandum of understanding with the ILO on trying to understand how we can expand the use and the application of DRiVE beyond just UNOPS and into the broader United Nations supply chain. Within this, we also started piloting automated risk notification processes as part of the solicitation and project management process. This year, we're taking these developments and these advancements further through the support and the support of our leadership and the expectations of the organization as we are moving towards developing a standalone platform in order for it to be part of our supplier management module to advance our efforts in due diligence, transparency, and bringing more added value to our project teams. Next slide, please. This journey continues, as I mentioned, the development of the supplier management module, which will help us improve data collection. It will help us expand and broaden the validation process of data that we're collecting, as well as to broaden and establish a more comprehensive capacity development component to bring more awareness as well and value to our suppliers. This will be done as a standalone platform, which will then feed into the different functions of due diligence, supplier engagement, as well as providing more quality to the procurement process. Next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, in conclusion, I'd like to acknowledge the ILO pilot that we have in place, which is aiming to lay the foundations for us to take a collective approach to supplier engagement. It's also allowing us to better understand the resource needs that will go into expanding this beyond UNOPS and into the broader United Nations supply chain, as well as identifying opportunities as well as gaps when it comes to carrying out this beyond our own operations. It also allows us to explore the different expertise under the different agencies and different operational environments. With that, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Eugene, who's going to focus more on the implementation of DRiVE and get more into the details of some of the practices and examples we've experienced over the last couple of years. Thank you very much.
Yes, thanks, Marcus, and thanks everyone for joining in. The development of DRiVE, as you may have seen from Marcus's presentation, has been an iterative process. And we have over the period tested out various methodologies of our approach or getting our approach down, and have recently established 4 main cycles of the DRiVE program. And I'll just walk you through how it's implemented across our procurement and in our projects as well. The DRiVE program starts off with a data collection from our suppliers, and this is mainly done through the DRiVE self-assessment questionnaire. As Marcus mentioned, the self-assessment questionnaire is embedded on our e-sourcing platform, and suppliers are typically required to complete it as part of their bidding document. Now, when the data is collected from our suppliers through the questionnaire, it goes into our databases, and there are some analytics done in the background, and we're able to present or gather some powerful insights on how our suppliers are performing or engaging on sustainability issues. And I'll show that in the preceding presentation or slides. The next stage of the process is the assessment stage, where we verify the responses of our suppliers. The questionnaire, as you saw, covers a number of sustainability themes, including human rights, health and safety, environmental management. And for the program, we take a management systems approach. In this sense, we look at what organizations have in terms of policies, how they go about implementing the policies. In this case, we'll be looking at the procedures around certain areas, and also look at proof of practices to those areas. So, for example, if we were to be checking on an area like health and safety, we would like to see how the organization has mainstreamed health and safety in the organization, for example, through their policies. We would also want to see their procedures, possibly around risk management and the like. And as a proof of practice, we'd want to see what's been done previously. So a report or record of a risk assessment that will be reviewed. And typically what we do in terms of assessment is either desktop reviews, where suppliers submit their documents and we review them remotely, or we could also go on site to look at the suppliers, how the suppliers are performing in reality. And in both cases, we would review their documents. We would also look at examples of practices and try to identify if there are any areas of improvement based on the responses and our observations. Based on the self-assessment, we are able to identify if there are any gaps in how the suppliers operate within the organizations, especially looking at the areas we cover in the program. And if there are any areas for improvement, we communicate it to the suppliers through corrective action plans, which we actively develop with the suppliers. Here we highlight areas of improvement and we provide them with options on how to make those improvements. Suppliers are allowed on a voluntary basis to indicate how they want to address these issues, to set timelines and deadlines to it, and also assign responsible persons for these initiatives. The last stage of the DRiVE process is the impact measurement stage, where we go and monitor how suppliers have actively implemented the corrective action plans we have issued to them. And based on that, we're able to measure these as impacts. So, for example, if a supplier has implemented, let's say, a maternity policy or a parental leave policy, it goes to impact or affect the employee or the workforce in a positive way. And in such ways, we're able to make some measurements around it. And also if, for example, they have implemented a policy around child labor within their supply chains, it also goes a long way to implement what we are trying to achieve at UNOPS, and also ultimately the SDGs around these areas. Yes, can we go on to the next slide? Over the period of its implementation, we've actively engaged with suppliers across many countries. As you can see on our slide, we've engaged with suppliers in Africa, in Latin America, in Asia, and we continue to have a lot of engagement with them. Over the period, we've been able to engage 13,000 suppliers across our procurement processes, and on an ongoing basis, we review their responses and we engage them where possible to understand how they actually implement sustainability initiatives within the organizations. And I'll show the analytics behind this very soon. As part of our process, we have very recently also developed what we call the risk app, or risk notification feature in our process. This is an automated approach to identifying and flagging suppliers who may have potential risks to certain areas which we have classified as high risk. So if you look on the right side of the slide, we have highlighted areas which fall under safeguarding risk, and this include forced labor, child labor, health and safety, sexual exploitation and abuse, and also additional risk areas which cover bribery and corruption, conflict of interest, and also in cases where suppliers have responded in a way which indicates an outlier profile or possibly dishonesty in their responses. Now, the automated approach takes into account the supplier's responses in the DRiVE questionnaire and also other external data sets. This would include country data sets around child labor, forced labor, sexual exploitation. And if a supplier has responded in a way that indicates that there could be a high risk of this, the procurement teams are typically notified at the award stage of the supplier, and then there are certain guidance provided to the procurement teams on how to engage with the suppliers. There are opportunities for improvement if we do identify or verify that a risk is present, and we actively do this through the inclusion of contractual clauses in our contract, and also engaging with the suppliers beyond our contract management phases to ensure that they have actually implemented what we have included or what we have highlighted as areas of improvement. Can we go on to the next slide? In terms of how it works, this is just a short GIF which shows you how it does, how it operates. So there's a platform which is dedicated to notifying procurement teams on this, and the colleagues are able to actively verify and engage with suppliers through the platform, and also provides them on guidance on how to actively include contractual clauses if there's a need for it. Can we go on to the next slide? As well, we have also focused on our efforts to support our colleagues, especially with engaging with suppliers. And one way we do that is through our supplier prioritization tool. And here as well, we use data around the financial exposure of suppliers, which considers the spend with a supplier, the length of our contract agreement with them, and also the type of contract agreement with them, as well as the sustainability risks associated with the supplier. The sustainability risks are calculated based on the industry risks of the supplier, and also looking at the country risk from the country risk based on the country the supplier is operating from. The benefit of this approach is that it helps procurement teams to actively and proactively identify suppliers who could fall into critical areas. And in terms of mitigation actions or further engagement, they would know where to, for example, conduct an on-site inspection or a desktop review, and also the type of risk they should focus on when it comes to verifying their responses in these areas. And this would be briefly demoed in our presentation. So if I could take over your screen briefly, Ana Paula, I'll just show us the various tools we've developed. Here. Okay. I hope you all can see my screen. Okay, that's good. Yes, so the DRiVE dashboard is where all the supplier data gathered is analyzed and presented in a form of reports. As you see on there, the various sustainability themes we have mentioned in our presentation are captured on here. And over the period, we have period under consideration from January 1st, 2024, we've engaged with 1,690 suppliers in our contracts, and they have completed a DRiVE questionnaire. And based on their responses, we are able to generate an overview of how they perform in the various sustainability areas. One thing we have taken in our approach beyond risk management is also to understand the maturity of the suppliers. So on the dashboard, we characterize our suppliers according to 4 maturity levels. But at a basic level, it would mean that they do not have anything in place. At a developing level, suppliers at such levels are typically doing or implementing sustainability practices or operations in an informal way. At a mature level, we expect that they would have implemented systems in place, and also at an advanced level, they possibly are exceeding expectations in some of these areas. So with the dashboard, with the responses of the suppliers, you're able to generate an overview of how they perform. And we can tailor or view our responses by country levels. And we can also view it by the size of the entities as well. And for procurement teams, they're also able to tailor and view their suppliers' responses by their offices as well. So as an example, I'm showing the responses of suppliers in Kenya. And this is how the outlook looks like. So this is a self-assessment, and this is how suppliers have responded in this area. And it usually would run some verification to ensure that the responses are actually accurate and also identify areas for improvement. The other tool I want to use this opportunity to demonstrate to you is also the prioritization tool, where we also are able to categorize our suppliers according to various risk levels or categorizations and based on their spend. So for example, if we were to look at an office, possibly again in the DRC, we would be able to see how suppliers fall in terms of risk and categorization. So at a critical level, it means that the risk level in terms of finance and also sustainability risks are high. As you go down the scale into the monitoring section, the risk minimizes, and also your financial exposure is very low. And we believe this is a tool to help our procurement officials and also project teams focus their efforts on suppliers who there would be a maximized impact in terms of engagement. So I will hand over at this point to Maria Laura to talk about how she's implemented or her experience with the DRiVE program over the period. Thank you.
Thank you, Eugene. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I am Laura Clarich, and I am the country director for the UNOPS Panama office. And I will be sharing with you the on-the-ground experience of implementing DRiVE in our projects. And the first experience I'm going to share with you is I'm going to go back to 2019 in the beginning of this initiative. And in Argentina, we were delivering a project in order to connect more than 20,000 schools to internet, impacting more than 5 million students, bringing technology and democracy in order to be able to grow. So we have a supplier base that we could take the opportunity to work with. So we start working with Claire's team, with Marcos and with Eugene at that time, preparing the on-site inspections. And before the inspections, the expectations of the suppliers were, they really didn't know what to expect, what was going to happen there. So it was interesting, the process of collaborating with them in order to build those sessions. We went along all the questions and the 10 dimensions of the supplier code of conduct. And by the end of that week, we performed many visits, and the result was that the suppliers were very inspired because they discovered that they not only were going to deliver the impact and the goods and the connections to internet, but they could also impact their companies, their people, and the communities. When we finished these inspections, I think the most amazing part of this program began, because in those visits to the suppliers, we took a picture of how they were along all these dimensions. However, at that time, we committed with them in order to implement a corrective and preventive action plan on the items they wanted to commit. So it was really amazing because at that time, COVID pandemic was beginning, and really the focus of our suppliers was on survival. However, they committed to many actions that we were able to follow up on the following years, and they don't only commit to continuous improvement, as Anker mentioned, but also the commitment to get better and better, and not only implementing what they commit at the beginning. So the journey and the feedback from our suppliers was really amazing, and they were really inspired. The second story I'm going to bring you is in Mexico, where UNOPS was engaged with the government of Mexico to procure the consolidated demand of medicines of the country. And at that time, we also engaged from the team. The team, as you have seen, has tools and videos, documents, everything to support you and to make your journey so much better, and to understand how to implement that in a successful way. And with the lessons learned we had from Argentina and many other countries in the world, as Eugene mentioned, we were able not only to do on-site visits in this project, which was at that time one of the biggest acquisitions projects in United Nations history. So the base of suppliers allow us not only to do these on-site inspections at visits, but also to make remote consultations with our suppliers, and we learn how to engage with them in a different way. We didn't need to review all the questions or all the matters at that time, but specific things. We also engage with them in performing pilots, measuring scope 3 emissions, understanding what the methodology was and how they could get better at that. And we also made at that time deep dives into a specific matter, a specific subject, like gender and diversity. And from this project, we had specific outcomes, and our suppliers, for example, developed action plans to promote the employment and inclusion of people with disabilities. We had suppliers that ensured that the reporting mechanism and investigations for harassment to protect the victims were in place. They developed questionnaires to assess their own suppliers. So what was amazing is that they were multiplying this DRiVE initiative. They implemented anti-corruption policies to their code of conduct. They developed salary guidelines to establish specific pay band for each role and not each gender. And for example, they developed internal KPIs to measure progress on diversity and inclusion. And all of them, in the end, were very engaged in this initiative because, as they mentioned, they were very inspired. And the initiative also inspired all of us in the ground. And nowadays, in Panama, we're about to begin our work with this incredible work that the team has done with the dashboard and the data, to work with our suppliers in infrastructure and to understand how we can make sustainable infrastructure hand in hand with our suppliers. So I think it's an invitation for all of you to also connect with the team which gives an amazing support, and how we could collaborate among us to multiply this initiative and make it bigger and more impactful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you again, everyone, for joining. And I think we have a couple of minutes to answer some questions. So, Marina, is there any question in the Q&A?
Yes, thank you very much to all the panelists for your amazing, interesting experiences and ideas. We have a couple of questions in the chat, and please keep it coming. The first question is, beyond due diligence, are there any possible uses of the data gathered from the suppliers? If anyone can take it.
And Claire, would you like to take that, or you can talk about it in a broader context?
Yeah, I can try. I think due diligence, obviously, just one aspect. I think in terms of the data, it also helps us understand the challenges that some of our suppliers may be facing as well. It's given us an idea of the markets in which we operate. I think it also allows us to, not for us to use it, but for suppliers themselves. One of the aspirations we have is to allow them to see what their performance is compared to their group of peers in an anonymized way. So I think there's an element beyond due diligence that can definitely be very useful to organizations. But Marcus, do you want to build on that?
Yeah, I think the key point is about knowledge and trying to understand the markets themselves. So while due diligence is fundamental to us having a more risk-based approach, I think also under the responsibility of development, it's also useful for us to understand the markets and how we can work better with them and how we can help move the markets to a more mature space with regards to sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your answers. The next question is, did you have any experience of including provisions on gender balance in contracts with suppliers?
Go ahead, Paula. Lara, I think you've got some good examples, particularly from Mexico.
Indeed. We, for example, included in infrastructure contracts and bidding processes a request for the suppliers to have, for example, at least 20% of the staff they are hiring of women in those industry where we need a higher balance. That would be a good example, I think.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, Paula, it's also a very challenging area to identify, let's say, the makeup of the gender balance in organizations, particularly when you're visiting them, also identifying women-owned businesses with regards to focuses on women's economic empowerment. This does at least allow us to start forming the conversation with our suppliers beyond just putting in mandatory requirements with them. Thanks.
If I can add on to that, Marcus. So there are cases where we've also engaged with suppliers and we have identified or observed that they actually are implementing gender inclusion and also very social progressive initiatives within the organizations without actually meaning to do it, right? So in such cases, for example, we would give them some guidance on how to formalize and sustain those initiatives. So those are one of the ways we also actually drive or push our organizations to engage within this area.
Great. Thank you very much for your answers. The next two questions I can group in one, and it's a very relevant one. So, hello team, thanks for the presentation. Are there any initiatives underway to launch DRiVE on the UNGM for the bigger UN use? And the next one is thank you to the UNOPS DRiVE team for this presentation. And I would like to ask, why is DRiVE not part of UNGM?
And Claire, would you like to lead this as well? And I can supplement it if you need.
Yes, I'm happy to start. So, as many of you will be familiar with the United Nations Global Marketplace, which is a cross UN initiative where our suppliers can register and see contracts and awards and tenders. DRiVE obviously was developed by UNOPS as part of our digitalization program, as you will have heard. We are developing DRiVE as a standalone module. So the possibilities of DRiVE being integrated into UNGM are definitely there. That's one of the reasons why we developed it as a standalone module, is that it can be integrated into other organizations' systems. It is not in UNGM yet because obviously UNOPS is the only agency that is currently using DRiVE. But we are, as you've heard, piloting this with ILO. We've discussed this with other organizations, and we would really hope that there is sufficient interest and uptake for us to use this across the UN system, not just to foster collaboration, but also to make our suppliers' lives easier, right? You'll know that there are always some forms of questionnaires that some agencies will have, also searching to ascertain or obtain the similar information. So one of the opportunities we have here is to have a single point of entry and a single, form that organizations would have to fill in, avoiding duplication of effort, but also creating more synergies and allowing us to not just build our suppliers' capacity, but also have a more integrated way of looking at these questions. Over.
Yeah, thanks. And I'll just add to that by saying that sometimes solutions sound easy, but the implementation of them are a little bit more complicated. We're dealing with thousands of suppliers. When we start multiplying that over the whole supplier profile, particularly within UNGM, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of suppliers. So it would be, we want to make sure when we expand and roll out this, we understand the implications. We don't want to roll out good ideas that end up being compromised by just the scale of it. So we're taking this approach also, as I mentioned in my presentation, to understand the resource needs as well, because obviously this requires not only people to manage it, but we also require also technology to deal with it as well as human resources that go behind that.
Great, thank you. The next two questions are related more to the supplier's experience with DRiVE. And it sounds as, what if supplier can't answer some of the questions? Can they still apply for tender?
So I can take this. The DRiVE questionnaire is included in our tenders based on policy. Usually suppliers are able to complete the questionnaire. By engaging with the suppliers, we also provide them with an opportunity to understand the questions a bit better and also determine the accuracy of their responses. The responses of the questionnaire the answers in the questionnaire are not used as evaluation criteria at this point. So it does not directly have an impact on a supplier being awarded or not. Again, we take the approach of continuous improvement and also capacity building. So where we see that there are opportunities for improvement or where there are gaps, would focus on capacity building with the supplier. So it does not have an impact, and they can still apply for their tender.
Great, thank you, Eugene. And the last question for now is, could you please give clear example of how DRiVE or UNOPS has built the capacities of suppliers during the process of the CAPA implementation?
I think all of us on this call have some experiences we can share, and I will also ask Laura to complement this as well, although she did touch on this in her example. The personal experience I can talk about was actually when we were working in Argentina. And we actually had suppliers that were relatively mature with regards to some of the management systems they had in place. When they engaged with us, they had a certain level of confidence with regards to their work, but they were very accommodating, and we worked closely with them. And going through the exercise and the process with them, we did find that their focus on health and safety as a management system was not as good as they had thought it was. Because they took pride in their management system approach as an organization, they actually used the feedback that we got in order to implement improved procedures and health and safety approach. That was one example. Another example we had with a supplier based in Jordan who was working on providing the provisions of medical devices. They had ambitions of improving as an organization. They also wanted to use this as an opportunity to improve their competitiveness. And they took a broad spectrum of many of the observations that we had used to communicate to them through corrective actions in order to apply into their organizations. This meant formalizing many of their informal procedures they had in place. And they were able to establish themselves as a much stronger competitive supplier within the region as well, going beyond just the sustainability components.